Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Saeyls Online Forum 2022. The purpose of this forum is to give presentations on research categories through Zoom and have an online discussion with other participants. The participants will research on the theme related to the given category and present the results in the forum. Other participants will be able to ask questions during the Q&A session. Firstly, please allow me to introduce myself. I am Zuhir Ahmad, and I'll be serving as a moderator for this forum. Before we welcome our first presenter, here's a short outline on what our topic is about today. There are many factors contributing to global issues, such as climate change, war, and the management of the COVID-19 pandemic, can be viewed as repercussions in the lack of responsible and empathetic leaders in our society. To bring a change in these issues, we need to learn how to improve our leadership qualities. How do we ensure we don't make the same mistakes as our predecessors? How can we, as youths, step up to make sure our future is guaranteed? Now, let's welcome Muhammad Assad bin Abdul Halim to give his presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Sanjali. Allow me to share my screen. Okay, greetings and a very warm welcome to you all. My name is Muhammad Assad, and I am a student in SMI IQKL, Malaysia. First of all, many thanks to SMK Sri Aman students and teachers for organizing this wonderful event and for allowing me to speak on this special evening. My topic for today is Malaysia's issues, before versus now. As an introduction, I will be talking about three big issues in Malaysia: how long they have occurred, some solutions, and leaders' characteristics, which I will explain later on. The first issue is poverty. During independence, nearly 50% of Malaysia's citizens were struck with poverty. The Malays were the majority in the country, while also being the majority in poverty created social tensions. This unfortunately led to the 13th May 1969 incident, in which over 100 were killed in a riot due to civil unrest. In 1971, the government implemented the new economic policy as a response. The NEP main goals were to eradicate poverty irrespective of race and restructure the social economy so as to not let one race have a monopoly on one or multiple sectors. The NEP was successful in lifting millions out of poverty, a reduction from nearly 50% to 15% from 1970 to 1990. By 2019, the poverty rate was steady at about 6%. Unfortunately, this isn't true for all the states in Malaysia. For the rural states, they usually have a higher rate of poverty due to unequal share of development, such as employment and wage increases with more urban states. According to the Minister of the Prime Minister's Economy Department, some of the states include Sabah, Sarawak, Kelantan, Terengganu, Kedah, and Perlis. The next issue is about climate change. This picture was taken on the 20th December 2021 in Shah Alam. It was the aftermath of 3 days of non-stop raining. This shows how vulnerable Malaysians are to sudden climate disasters and also vulnerable to climate change. Unfortunately, Malaysia is an economy that heavily relies on its natural resources. One of them is its forests. Malaysia has been cutting down trees since at least the 2000s to harvest the timber, as is stated by Speaker Yu Ziyan in his presentation category, Earth 20 years from now. Forests are also cleared to make room for fields, such as the case for palm oil and rubber. According to the Mongol Bay Rainforest Branch, from 2010 to 2021, at least 5 billion trees has been taken down in Malaysia. This is a shame because trees are capable of taking out carbon emissions out of the air and exchange it for oxygen. They can also reduce stormwater runoff, which in turn reduces landslides, while being the main habitat for millions of fauna. While forests are being cleared, CO2 emissions have been on the rise. Excessive exposure to the gases can lead to health problems, such as headaches, dizziness, difficulty breathing, and difficulty breathing. The gases make the weather hotter and sea levels rise due to the greenhouse effects. The weather also becomes unpredictable with more contaminants in the air. The last issue is the last issue I'll be talking about today is the pandemic. According to a Bernama news report, Malaysia's first Malaysian case was on the 2nd February 2020. Since then, we have had multiple waves of outbreaks and lockdowns that have affected Malaysia as a whole. After about 4.5 million registered cases and 35,000 deaths, what exactly did we get? Well, not eliminating the virus. The numbers are still increasing, just not as wildly. Mentally, people have developed depression and anxiety, loneliness, and grief. Depression and anxiety could be the byproducts of the uncertainty of the pandemic, where many people were unsure of their job security and or reacting to their close ones being infected. Loneliness occurred because of the social distancing between everyone and the severe lockdowns. Humans are social beings, and we crave that social connections to keep us sane. And grief could be attributed to loved ones dying of the disease. Economically, according to a Research for Social Advancement report, the main economic sector that benefited from the pandemic was e-commerce. E-commerce before the pandemic was merely an alternative, but now has become the go-to for shopping. On the contrary, the retail sector, the entertainment sector, the travel and tourism sector, and the agriculture and aquaculture sector have all been on the downward spiral due to lockdowns and supply chain issues. Socially, according to the International Monetary Fund, social unrest in a country increases in the long term of the pandemic. If the government does not solve a pandemic in a timely manner, the people will get frustrated and take matters into their own hands. For example, in 1832, the cholera pandemic hit Paris and killed 20,000 people. The spread heightened class tensions as the rich blamed the poor for spreading the disease, and the poor thought they were being poisoned. Historians have argued that the pandemic interaction with pre-existing tensions was the cause of what came to be known as the Paris Uprising of 1832. Now, a few solutions. For poverty, the government's economic planning unit, one of its key policies, as stated on their website, to intensify development in rural areas and to bridge the economic gap between urban and rural areas. Next, for climate change prevention, the government has launched the Greening Malaysia program, where 100 million trees will be planted in the 100 million trees campaign. In this program, all Malaysians, government agencies, private companies, NGOs, and government and private schools can all contribute and enjoy a 7 to 10% tax relief. For the pandemic, it's much more difficult to tackle the social and mental effects because it requires careful amendments as to not make the situation worse. Economically, the government has already taken action by giving out stimulus packages such as Prihatin for small and medium enterprises, and the National Economic Recovery Plan to individuals and companies that will help keep them afloat. The reason all the solutions I've stated are from the government is the fact that they exist and we should support it. We should shout our voices on the internet in support and continue asking all our leaders to keep it going. We have been wanting policies and change for the better, and here it is. It exists, and we should support our representatives who are in support of it. Leaders who have certain characteristics that we need to make sure the nation will be better off than before they were in charge. Which brings me to my last slides. Leaders' characteristics that we need. Number one, someone who is willing to do what is best for the country. Not what a marginalized group wants, but for everyone in Malaysia. No matter if at risk of losing their position, they will stick to their words. Number two, someone who is a great communicator. Communicate extensively, clearly, and convincingly to get support from other parties, to get better collaboration opportunities with them, and to have the support of the people. Lastly, number three, someone who is trustworthy and has a high level of integrity and is firm with their morals. This to make sure they use the nation's economy to invest in other sectors and not into their own wallets. And that is all from me. Thank you all for listening and lending me your ears. Thank you again to those at SMK Sri Aman for having me here. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you very much, Muhammad. Now it is time for a Q&A session. Does anyone have a question they would like to put forward to Muhammad?
Yeah, I do. Right. Hi, Hasbul. Muhammad. Sorry. How would we get past mental issues caused by things such as the pandemic?
Thank you for your question. Mentally, it's mostly a problem and a solution that includes the other people and individuals. They need to learn, usually the individuals will need their family members to help them get out of their mental illnesses. So yeah, that's my answer.
All right, does
Right,
anyone
okay,
have
thank you,
anyone else have
Muhammad.
a question for him? All right, so we have a question. In your opinion, do you think this pandemic is a good idea?
Who would say this is a good idea? Of course, it's a bad idea. Of course, it's bad, but it's just that out of this, we have out of a bad situation, we have to take the most good out of it and improve ourselves so that for example, pandemic like to improve our sanitation so the pandemic will never happen again.
All right, thank you. Are there any more questions? All right, thank you again, Muhammad. Now we shall welcome our next presenter. Let's welcome Jonathan Ho Wei Jing to begin his presentation.
All right, I'll start sharing my screen. All right, you guys can see, yeah? Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Jonathan and I'm from SMK section for Bandai Kinara. So today my topic I'll be presenting is modern leaders. Are they the root of global issues? So here's a small introduction. First, are modern leaders the problems to society? They play a huge role in developing our worlds, and we know that without them, our world won't progress or develop. However, leaders can also bring the downfall for society. Not all leaders bring good, and every decision that they made have consequences. There are some that do more harm than good. So what are modern leaders? First, they have a passion. They have a passion of doing something that inspires passion to the followers. The passion elevates productivity and ensures their followers are committed to what they're doing. Next, they have a clear vision. They see the bigger picture and can unite their followers behind their vision. Leaders are visionaries for growth and expansion. Next, they have a purpose. They have a purposeful leadership, and what they are doing have a meaning. They have a purpose to stay focused and committed to overcome whatever obstacles and distractions that may have in their way. So, here are some of the examples of our modern leaders today. First is Vladimir Putin. He is the president of Russia and he's a very dominant and strategic thinking person. He has a strong presidential power and only wants control. However, he also reduces tax profits and poverty by half in Russia. Amazing, isn't he? So next, we have Jack Ma. He is a self-made billionaire from China, and he came from a poor family. However, what makes him so different? Well, he practiced cross-cultural communication with tourists. When tourists visited China, he promised to give them a free tour with exchange of the English language. And that's how he learned his English. Next, we have Bill Gates. He is the co-founder of Microsoft, and I'm sure that most of you are probably using his gadgets right now in front of your screen. And he also inspires IT and focuses on developing others. He set up the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and enhance healthcare and reduce poverty and also expand the education on ITs. And last but not least, we have Jeff Bezos. He is the CEO of Amazon. And when Amazon first started, it wasn't very popular because online shopping wasn't as popular back then compared to now. So therefore, the business wasn't going up. However, he was very persistent about this business and he kept continuing it and didn't give up, as his vision is bigger compared to his failures. Therefore, right now during the pandemic, his business started to boom a lot and his company is now worth 1.7 trillion US dollars. So here are some of the examples of modern leaders today. Next, what are some of the setbacks of modern leadership that causes global issues? First, poverty. Corruption and greed of the leaders has made it difficult for World Bank to reduce poverty to 3% by 2030. All this due to their selfishness. And next, we have climate change. Cutting down forests, polluting rivers, seas, and no regard of global warming pose major health issues to us. Next, food insecurity. We might be experiencing one right now with the prices of food going up in Malaysia. This because due to the war between Russia and Ukraine, and we also have mental health. Pandemic handling has worsened mental health due to social isolation, and then refugee crisis, as millions of people are displaced due to civil disorders in African countries. So, what modern leadership need to be high performing? So modern leadership need to focus on productivity, not on politics. They must give constructive criticism and not just be a people pleaser. They must learn to adapt leadership style to ever-changing environment, because not everything always comes to your plan. They must understand self-leadership and they must know their own strengths and weaknesses and control themselves. Don't be too reactive. Be proactive in influencing others rather than spending time to put out the fire. Why not? Try to not make the fire happen in the first place. And they must communicate effectively. To lead, you need to communicate effectively so that your message gets across. Okay, so here are some of the modern leadership quotes that I have prepared. One of my favorite ones is Bill Gates, where he stated that it's fine to celebrate success, but it's more important to heed the lesson of failure. As this message say that even though they fail, they take it as a learning experience instead of giving up, which is really important for all of us too. So this marks the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Now it is time for a Q&A session. Does anyone have a question you'd like to put forward to Jonathan?
I do. As Jonathan stated before, that they should not focus on they should focus more on productivity instead of politics. Why do you say that? What's your opinion on that? Because doesn't politics equal to the productivity of the country, of the community, of the group and all? That's my question.
Well, politics doesn't mean, because yes, it does focus on the country and all, but sometimes it will pull away further from what they're achieving in the first place. Maybe they want to do something unique for the country, but some people might not go with them and might think that this idea is a fluke. So if they keep following on politics and all, they're gonna stray further from their goal in the first place. Instead, they should focus on what they're doing and must be productive with it. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Are there any other questions? Okay, so we have a question. What do you think is the biggest problem of modern leaders?
Modern leaders. What I think the big problem is that maybe they are making some irrational decisions sometimes, as they are doing more harm than good, as stated. Instead, they should try to be more balanced between their goals and what it can cause to us. And they must not always do it for what they are doing and for their selfish needs. That's what I feel is the biggest problem right now.
All right, thank you. Now, are there any other questions for Jonathan? Okay. Most people say that leaders are bred. How can you breed leaders within our community?
How can we breed leaders within our community? Well, first, they must have a confidence, I think. From young, they must learn how to communicate and speak well with others and not be afraid of people. They must learn how to not be too nice with other people. They must be strict, and they must be focused on what they're doing and make sure that they are not always saying yes, and they must sometimes use the word no too. All right.
All right, thank you. Now, are there any more questions for Jonathan? Okay, we have one more question. Can modern leaders also be selfish?
That depends what the selfish is. Is for the right cause, sure they can. And if they know that what they're doing doesn't really have a big impact towards everyone, or maybe just a slight impact, it should be all right. But if they are really selfish, and they must also know that they must not be too selfish, and as this will always lead to like corruptions and corruptions, politics and all, and it's like it's not good, and they must learn how to control themselves too.
All right, thank you. Are there any more questions? Okay. Do you think transparency is important within a leader?
Yes, I think it's important, as you need to be open with your followers on what you plan to do so that they can see a bigger vision of what you want to do and hopefully reach your goal faster.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Now, are there any more questions? All right. So that's the end of the Q&A session for Jonathan. Now we'll have our next presentation. Let's invite Zuhir Ahmad bin Muhammad Rizal to begin his presentation.
Hi everyone. Could you guys give me just a second? Right. Okay. Right. So please allow me to share my screen. All right. Hello everyone, and good afternoon to everyone who is watching, whether it is on the Zoom call or via the YouTube Live. My name is Zuhir Ahmad Rizal, and I am from SMK Sultan Abdul Samad, and my topic for today will be Learn and Be Better. I can't move my slides for some reason. All right, okay. before we get started, what are the responsibilities of a world leader? First thing is to protect the rights of all humans. We are all equal and we all deserve the same rights, no matter our age, gender, religion, or skin color. You and me and everyone around us deserves the same rights, deserve not to be discriminated against, and deserve the same opportunities. A leader of a country must protect everyone's rights. Second thing is to lead discussions in crucial decision-making processes. They have to be able to take on the burden of making decisions that will impact millions of lives. This can be extremely taxing on one's physical and mental health. So we need strong-willed individuals to hold this responsibility. Anyone other than tough people will simply not cut it. In some countries, the prime minister or the president also acts as the leader of the country's military force. Now, when you have the entire military might of a country under your command, and you have the power to give them commands, a huge amount of pressure will be put on you not to misuse that power and to use it for the well-being of your people. To listen to the people and their concerns. A world leader has to be someone who listens, because leaders who listen will inevitably help progress the country to a better state. Leaders who listen to the people under them and work together with their subordinates are basically the ingredients on a recipe list for a country that will bloom and succeed. And my next point is for them to be ethical. This is quite obvious. However, there are many world leaders who aren't, whether it may be taking bribes or cruel acts against their oppositions. They do this to hold on to power. And there are many ways for them to do this, not just the two that I mentioned. World leaders must be good people. It simply won't work if their hearts are soiled by jealousy or their ego or their greed for power. And lastly is to end their term with the country in a better state than it was before their term. To advance a country and make progress is always the goal, and every world leader should aim to do so. It would be a crying shame for them to have regressed the country by the end of their term. Now, so why should our leaders be people who care? We tend to do better with things we care about. We put in more effort to see success. There should be a desperation in our leaders to see their countries thriving. You have to care about the well-being of the country and its people as the leader of that country. For example, a student is more likely to thrive in subjects they love and are passionate about, and are more likely to struggle with subjects they aren't quite as fond of. Now, it's a comparison on very different extremes. Yes, I understand. However, the same rules still apply. You do better at things you love to do. An example of a leader who cares about the well-being of the country and its people is Jacinda Ardern. Just 10 days after the Christchurch attack, she decided to change the laws on the sale of weapons. How quick was that? Just 10 days. Just 10 days after the attack, she changed the laws in the country. Imagine changing a law in your country in under 2 weeks, while some governments are still very divided on what stance they even want to take. A leader who cares for her people and a leader who loves her land. Jacinda Ardern is truly a role model for us all. We also have Nelson Mandela, who despite all odds, arrests, and 27 years in prison, he became the first democratically elected president of South Africa, and he negotiated the end of apartheid. He gave everyone in his country the same rights and same opportunities, regardless of skin color. And he taught us that if we are faced with adversity, we should always try our best to overcome it and get out of the difficult times better than we did coming into it. So what happens if our leaders don't care? Well, we won't do well in things that we don't care about, and leadership roles are no different. This is quite cut and dry, as we've all experienced having things to do that having to do things that we aren't quite as passionate about, such as, well, chores or homework. It is a comparison on very different extremes. However, again, the same rules still apply. We won't do things well if we aren't passionate about them. Can I have a second to drink water, please? Give me a second. All right, moving on. An example of a leader who doesn't care about the well-being of the country or its people is Robert Mugabe. He only claims to care to care about his people when he really doesn't feel that way. He only cares about his power and his status. He clung on to power for too long and single-handedly destroyed Zimbabwe's economy. Now, in the mid-2000s, Zimbabwe experienced the second highest inflation in history under his authoritarian rule. Zimbabweans would wake up as early as 2 a.m. to go to the nearest ATM, and on a good day, they would only be able to withdraw as little as 9 ringgit. And on normal days, they wouldn't even be able to withdraw any money at all because they would have found that money has run out of money in the ATM. He also was corrupt and once fired his vice president to elect his wife as the new vice president. This is what someone who only cares about power and wealth would do to a country. Now, here are the implications of having incompetent world leaders. The economy could be affected in a negative way. Citizens will have low morale. It will be more difficult for citizens to make a living, let alone be successful. And worst case scenario would be loss of life due to war, famine, or diseases and viruses. Now, these points all relate to each other. However, my point is that for the economy, it will be more difficult for citizens to make a living, let alone be successful. You can't be successful in an economy that does not enable you to do so. And citizens will automatically have low morale if they aren't able to be successful. And worst case scenario is if there's war in your country or you are in a civil war with an opposition leader within your country. So how do we get read up and find out? We need to read up on today's issues to gain a grasp on what is going on in the It never hurts to always be updated on current affairs, and not only will it help us understand the world around us better, it could also help us with our academics in school. By doing this, we become more aware and therefore become wiser and more matured individuals, fit to eventually lead our countries one day. We also need to spread the word. We should tell our family members, friends, whoever who will listen about what is going on in the world today. We should build a platform for ourselves to spread awareness. As teenagers, we are already used to spreading the word on things we are passionate about through social media platforms such as Instagram or Twitter or even Facebook. This already makes it so much easier for us to make a positive impact on the world. To me, to be able to have such an impact so easily at this age is one of the biggest advantages of technology. We also need to take action. After spreading the word, we should take steps to improve on the situation. However small our actions may seem, it matters. As long as we strive to make a collective change, we could make an impact. We shouldn't just spread the word. We should also take steps to make a difference. We can't stop there. Speaking of not stopping there, making a change for the better is a never-ending battle. As long as we keep running the marathon for change, we will always make a positive impact. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Zuhir. Now it is time for a Q&A session. As I don't have a question, do you like to put forward to Zuhir?
I do. Zuhir, can I ask, is caring all that we need when it comes to modern leaders? Is caring
Well,
enough? Is that the quality that matters above all else?
all right. Thank you for your question, and I'm sorry for interrupting you earlier. Right. Obviously, being caring is not the only quality that matters. However, I do believe that it is one of the most important traits and the traits that I am focusing on today. But we also need our leaders to be wise, smart, and rational people. However, if they don't care, being all that will be for naught because they will use their power for themselves uh, instead of the people. And leaders who care would use their power for the people under them and to strive to advance and make progress in the country. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now, does anyone else have a question for him? All right. Do you think that a good leader is someone who can carry out any task given, although they aren't passionate about it?
Wait, let me process the question real quickly. I think people who can carry out the task given, although they aren't passionate about it, are people who just disguises themselves as good leaders. Good leaders inherently care. They will always care. It is a part of them to care. If you do not care about your subordinates or the people under you, then you're not really a good leader, are you? And if you are able to do a good job, I still don't think that is you being a good leader because it's simply what you need. It's part and parcel of the job. If you aren't passionate and if you don't care about your people, then you simply are not a good leader because eventually it will show. Like as for example with Robert Mugabe, at first people saw him as this guy who freed them from the power of white minority. However, as time went on, he showed his true colors, which is a person who's power hungry and who wants wealth and status. So that is my point. Eventually, if you aren't someone who's caring, you will be seen as a leader who is not good. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
All right, thank you. Now, are there any other questions? A lot of the time, the older generation often advises the younger generation to not get involved with the global issues, as a lot of the time they might be sensitive. What is your take on this?
I feel that the older generation, well, some of the older generation are scared of the younger generation because we have such loud voices in our youth today. We have people who are so proactive and who are so passionate about making a change. And the old guard don't like that. They don't like that because they've been the status quo for how long, and they want to keep it that way. Like the feeling of being in power and the feeling of wealth and status is something that is addicting. So of course they will want to hold on to it. So it makes sense that they will say it. They say that, but they don't really mean that. They say that because they don't want the younger generation to take their post. Now we see our leaders getting younger and younger today, and I believe that is a good thing. I believe that the older generation should not say that, and I believe that if they do say that, then I think that there may be an ulterior motive to what is said.
All right, thank you. Now, are there any other questions? In your opinion, what do you think about Kim Jong-un in North Korea? Does he really care about his country?
I think this is quite obvious, but what I would think it's obvious that he doesn't really care. And if you look at the way he treats his people, he doesn't allow them to leave. He puts them, he gives them harsh punishments because for example, they may have been talking bad about him, and some officers or guards hurt them, and then they get sent to prisons or punishment centers or whatever. And that clearly shows that he doesn't really care about his country. Though if he believes he does care, then it is a very then that is very sick and twisted. He cares in a very sick and twisted way. He only cares about holding on to power and never letting go. And this is, we can see this from even his grandfather to his father to even him. It is a trend that has been going on since on the 1900s in the Kim family, I should say. And that just shows what an environment could bring out of you. If we live in an environment that is nurturing and supporting and kind, we turn out to be those things too. However, if we live in environments that aren't nurturing and is cruel and violent, we also tend to turn out that way.
All right, thank you, Zuhir. Now, are there any other questions for Zuhir? In your opinion, what aspect is the most important thing a world leader should act on?
I think social well-being. For example, I would, if there is a rampant racism in my country, I'll tackle that first. I'll tackle any discrimination, and I'll tackle things that will lead to infighting between my own people. Because as a leader, your people should always be united, and your people should never fight. And you fight things for the civil wars. And as we can see, the countries with civil wars, how do they turn out? Not great. Now they're still trying to recover. However, they're still light years behind some of our biggest economies in the world, such as China or the United States. And yeah, so first thing I would do is tackle the social issues and stuff like that to make sure that the people are united and share the same goal, which is seeing the country thrive and the economy bloom and stuff like that. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question.
All right, thank you. Now, are there any more questions? Zuhir. Young leaders can often be labeled as immature due to the lack of experience. Should this refrain the rest of the young generation from stepping up?
Of course not. Now, we have people, young leaders who are immature. However, I believe this applies to all things as well. We only look at the small, loud minority. So let's say we have this young, brash leader who is not such a great leader. We only look at that person. We won't look at the other great leaders. The small, loud minority is something that we will always see. The hate in our country, the racism, that's what we'll look at. We won't look at people of different races coming together and helping each other out. We'll only look at the negative things because that's human nature. We like to look at things that aren't quite so good. We look at the picture and we'll only look at that one black dot at the bottom corner. We won't see the rest of the picture full of greenery and mountains and beautiful views in that painting. So that is an analogy, I suppose. That is how we humans are. We'll only look at that one black dot instead of seeing the whole picture. So yes, so to answer the question, no, you should not make the younger generation refrain from taking leadership roles, because we need the younger people's input, because they are just as valuable as the older generation's input or opinions.
All right, thank you, Zuhir. Are there any more questions? Okay. When you see the leaders are getting younger and younger, do you think that the lessons we learned in the past is going to go to waste? Will history repeat easier and faster?
Let me process the question a bit. No, I do not think that the lessons we learn are going to waste, because the past, the older generations are history. They are going to be history. So we're learning from them. The gap is so close. So if let's say history is something that's behind us, right? And let's say that our history is still with us. Our older leaders are history, at least ones with the really old point of views. I consider them history. I do not look at them as our status quo. I do not look at them as what is going on right now. That they are our past. So we are directly learning from history right now because they are part of the past, while we are the status quo and we are the future. So we will always learn and learn and learn as long as we have some of the old guards with the really old-fashioned point of views. I hope my answer wasn't too convoluted.
Okay, thank you, Zuhir. Are there any more questions? How would a good leader find ways to persuade people into thinking about what's best for the country? Even though the leader really cares, some people don't see the country as the main focus.
Second. Right. So back to an early question where I answered that I would have people be united and have the same goal. This is exactly what I mean. Some people will only think about themselves or will think about what's going on around them instead of thinking about the collective. So how would I find ways to persuade them? Well, let's say that, for example, their concerns are about job opportunities. I would make it so that the economy would be really encouraging for those people and there'd be a lot of job opportunities. Therefore, automatically they would care about the country because their country cares about them. This is a two-way street. We as leaders have to care about our people, and our people will automatically care about us and everyone else as a collective. So I hope that answers the question.
All right, thank you, Zuhir. Are there any more questions? I know that caring and thinking about the people is very important, and I agree. How do you persuade people into keeping genuinely good people in the position power?
Wait a second, I am formulating an answer. Well, we have to make it so that the good leaders would benefit the people more than, let's say, the corrupt leaders. The corrupt leaders will only benefit those who work for them and those who cater to them, okay. Corrupt leaders will only help those who help them, and good leaders will help everyone. And that in itself should be enough of a motivation for people to keep pushing good people into positions of power, because we want them to be able to benefit everyone, yes, and we don't want them to just benefit just a select few people who only help them. So let's think about it this way: for the whole collective, a good person would be a better leader. But however, for a certain small minority, the corrupt leader would benefit the most. So we have to make it so that the good of the good leader outweighs the good of the bad leader for the certain minority. I hope that wasn't too convoluted. I feel that it was a bit convoluted. I hope that answers your question.
All right, thank you, Zuhir. Now, are there any more questions? All right, so that's all for the Q&A session. Now we shall take a short 5-minute break. Our next presentation will start at 3:55. See you all then. And welcome back, everyone. Let's enthusiastically welcome our fourth presenter, Sheriff Marcella binti Syed Amir Zuhaizat.
Hello. Allow me to share my slides real quick. All right, can everyone see? All right, I'll start. Hi, I'm Sheriff Marcella binti Syed Amir Zuhaizat. I'm from SMK Main Convent Ipoh, and I'll be presenting Modern Leaders, the Root of Global Issues. Growing up, our parents fed us lies, making us believe that this world is nothing but sunshine and rainbows. But as we grow older, we see the deceit through their cracks of our own experiences. Good afternoon. I'm Sheriff Marcella binti Syed Amir Zuhaizat, representing SMK Convent Ipoh. The topic, Modern Leaders, the Root of Global Issues. These are the contents of what I'll be talking about. First, we have ideology of leadership. I'll be introducing the origins of leadership. Secondly, you have global issues, the issues that exist due to the lack of leadership and what global issues I will be focusing on. Thirdly, we have characteristics of a leader, what we should expect from a leader and how we can look for a better leader. And lastly, we have to be heard. How do we, the society, voice our concerns? A brief introduction. The approaches that have taken course in the 20th century, the concept of leadership concludes that leadership is up to our own understanding. The ideology of leadership, what is it? I personally went for a historical approach. When I was looking for more understandings, the ideologies for leadership, I found 3 interesting articles. We have one from Ralph Stockdale in 1948, Personal Factors Associated with Leadership. We also have Abraham Zalesnik, his work on Lead to Excel. And lastly, I personally like this one, W.C.H. Prentice's Rejecting the Notion of Leaderships. All 3 people have different approaches when it comes to leadership. Prentice even rejects the notion of leaderships. So the question here is, why is it important for me to tackle the ideology of leadership first? Well, to understand if modern leaders are the root of global issues, we need to understand what makes someone a leader. As we see, Ralph Stockdale, he mentions that there is no consistent trait to differentiate a leader to a non-leader. But when we review Abraham Zalesnik's work, he mentions that a leader is more like an artist that can tolerate both sides of a situation. Then we also review W.C.H. Prentice's perspective. He mentions that leadership is an accomplishment of goal through direction of human assistance and a social achievement that stems through the leader's understanding. The ideology of leadership is up to our own understanding of leadership. I understand that to lead is to grab others' attention, to be firm, and to understand a situation. It depends on each person's understanding. Now that we understand the ideology of leadership, we can also look for 4 common leadership mistakes. Firstly, we have lacking humility. Lacking humility would show arrogance to our own society, our own subordinates. And secondly, we have avoiding conflict. Avoiding conflict will compromise feelings and will bottle up, and eventually one will explode. Thirdly, we have being too friendly. Now, this is quite uncommon to say that it is a mistake, but being too friendly, you'll easily be looked down upon by your rivals, your arch nemesis, and more. Lastly, we have not having faith. If a leader doesn't have faith in themselves, how they will underestimate their own capabilities and will allow their own subordinates to lack faith in them too, which can rise in more anxieties and conflicts. Now we're moving on to global issues. These are the global issues that I would be focusing on. Poverty. The definition of poverty itself is a state of condition where a community lacks financial resources for a minimum standard of living. Now, the causes of poverty, there is no singular cause for poverty, but poverty is often determined by socioeconomic status, ethnicity, gender, and geography. Most people are born into poverty and have a slim chance of overcoming it. Now we have social inequality. I'll be talking about social inequality. Social inequality occurs when resources in a given society are distributed unevenly, typically through norms of allocation that endanger specific patterns along lines of socially defined categories of persons. It is the differentiation preference of access of social goods in the society brought about by power, religion, kinship, prestige, race, ethnicity, gender, age, sexual orientation, and class. Social inequality usually implies the lack of equality of outcome, but may alternatively be conceptualized in terms of the lack of equality of access to opportunity. The social rights include labor market, the source of income, healthcare, and freedom of speech, education, political representation, and participation. Lastly, climate change. Climate change refers to a long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns. These shifts may be natural, such as through variations in the solar cycle. But since the 1800s, human activities have been the main driver of climate change, primarily due to burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. Burning fossil fuels generates greenhouse gas emissions that act like a blanket warmed around the earth, trapping the sun's heat and raising temperatures. Now that we understand these issues, we see them, we hear them, so how do we as a society overcome them? We alone have no power how the world works behind closed doors. We are just pawns in the play of a gambit. Well, the closest thing that we can do is to pick better leaders, which will be quite rough since the world isn't painted in black and white. We can't see anyone's true intention. How do we avoid pouring more fuel into the fire? Well, we can try to look for great qualities that we will hope for in a leader. We have honesty. Despite anything, no one is a fully clean slate. We can look for most of the honesty that they contributed into most of their own public talks, their own ideologies, their own concepts, their own work. We also need confidence. If someone underestimates their own abilities, it will raise their own society's own questions and their own debates whether that leader should even be leading if they have no confidence to lead. We also have delegate. Understanding how to represent an entirety group of people. We need leaders who know their own community, who know how to talk, who know how to talk on behalf of their own people. And lastly, we have commitment. If we don't have commitment, we don't have a trustable and dependable leader. Okay. We have 4 skills that good leaders need. We need patience, empathy, positivity, and reliability. If a leader can't be patient with current issues, more problems, more political upbringings, then we would have quite the childish leader. And we also need empathy. We need them to understand these issues, poverty. We need to understand their own problems within their own country, community, groups, whatever. Positivity and reliability, you can understand that. Now my last point, to be heard. Voicing out, basically. The importance when a person voices out, we need to be knowledgeable. Now, what do I mean by being knowledgeable? We need to stand for what the youth believe is right. Possess knowledge that dives deeper than the surface level. So when there are any discussions, debates, and/or arguments, one person will be prepared to debate. Though, do remember that we only have whatever the media gives us for information. So don't get too cocky when it comes to a difference of opinion. Always look at the topic from both point of views to grasp the topic well. Now we have political solidarity. Political solidarity refers to the ties in a society that bind people together as one. The term is generally employed in sociology and the other social sciences, as well as in philosophy and bioethics. It is also a significant concept in Catholic social teachings. Therefore, it is a core concept in Christian democratic political ideologies. Experiences of solidarity have figured prominently in the politics of the modern era, from the rallying cry of liberation theology for solidarity with the poor and oppressed through feminist calls for sisterhood bonds. Relating back to political solidarity, standing together, the youth should find people that would support their beliefs. I believe that only through solidarity in showing that we truly defend those who exercise their right to speak freely can we defeat those who use violence to silence free speech. Acts of solidarity provide the exercise speaking out on behalf of the journalists whose views abhor when their rights are being shredded, or in defense of the artist whose work you despise when he faces the censor's acts, or in support of the politicians whose opinion veer from your own when they face jail. These are the acts that force us to put compassionate practice. In so doing, we act not just in service of our own fellow human beings, but in service of humanity. Thank you. That's all.
All right, thank you so much, Sheriff. Now it is time for a Q&A session. Does anyone have a question they'd like to put forward to Sheriff?
Yes, I have a question. So about political solidarity and standing together, do you think we can learn something from the unionization in the US?
Can you rephrase your question?
What can we learn from the unionization? From like, if you don't know, a few months back in the US, Starbucks workers unionized so that they can have a better pay. What do you think we can learn from that?
Well, we can learn that if we have a community that can support us, a community that understands our own like arguments, a community that will back us up no matter what, it will create a stronger bond, and hopefully it will be heard from other superiors, if you get what I mean. Okay.
All right, thank you, Sheriff. Now, are there any more questions?
Yeah, I do. Right. So, Sharifa, how would we unmask the true intentions of a leader?
Pardon?
How would we unmask the true intentions of a leader?
We can't truly unmask someone's true intentions. They're their own intentions, but we can find patterns of what their intentions are from past talks, past speeches, past events. We will eventually find a pattern in this person's intentions, and hopefully we will understand their own intentions and all. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So now, are there any more questions?
Yes, I have a question. All right. So I remember you mentioned something about leaders need to be patient. If they're not, they'll be childish. Could you please elaborate more on the childish part?
The childish part. If you are easily pressured, if you are easily pushed to the edge, it will lead to radical decisions. You aren't in your clear state of mind to understand the situation, to reply to the situation. That's where conflict starts. That's where war starts. That's where all these big major historical events start. If you aren't patient, if you aren't strategic, you will lead to childish decisions. Does that help?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, are there any more questions? Okay. When it comes to choosing your leader, people tend to choose the friendlier and nicer person. If this is considered a mistake as a leader, how could one become a leader in the first place?
Give me a second. When it comes to choosing leader. I wouldn't say it's a mistake. I feel like it is, you don't have to you don't choose a leader based on your own biased intentions. It's not a mistake, but more of whether you are biased. How do I explain this? How would one become a leader in the first place? At the end of the day, we have votes, the democratic parties and all. We have votes, and it will all lead to biasness anyways. But to become a leader in the first place, we have to look at the qualities, like I said, and we have to look at the qualities of leaders. We should, to become a leader, to grasp attention, to be firm, to understand what's going on, to have that general knowledge, that depth of understanding. That's my answer, though it's quite confusing.
Right. Thank you, Sheriff. Now, are there any more questions? All right. So that's all for the Q&A session. Thank you again, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Now, last but not least, let's have our next presenter, Iman Zarhan bin Muhammad Izam, to start his presentation. I will be going for a short break for about 2 minutes. We'll see you all in about 4:13.
Hello. Okay.
All right, you
Um.
can start your presentation.
All right. Before I want to start, I want to just say in advance that I'm not feeling that well because I got attacked by the fever recently. But yeah. May I present my slides?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. So I hope you all can see your presentation right now. So my topic will be the big step of youth to face the world under the theme Modern Leaders to Rule of Global Issues. I'm Iman Zarhan and I'm from SK Baki Kuala Lumpur, and here I would like to present my findings. So firstly, we'll start with the introduction. Now, when we're talking about the future, there are many problems and endeavors that we might think it will happen in the long run. Like in this bubbles here, we have what if the impact of COVID-19 will last in a very long span, or perhaps leadership in rural countries. The poverty issue is a very big thing, or perhaps maybe a growth and diversification, the ever expanding world, and how diversity can cause many conflicts and contests. Okay. Now I will be giving an overview about leadership. In the context of education and skills, leadership is the ability to step up and lead a group or team in a constructive and effective manner. It also refers to those abilities and traits that see students stand up for their beliefs, taking care of others in their family and wider community, And also they will take that initiative to act whenever they discover a problem that they might be able to solve. So in general, leadership is about taking responsibility and acknowledging your own faults and problems whenever they emerge. Now, I'll be listing a lot of examples of problems with our current leaders. Now, people's trust and faith in leadership and institutions they represent is evaporating at an alarming rate. There's a deepening, widening crisis in the legitimacy and credibility of leadership. Now, without this process of reimagining, the world's very future will be at stake. Bad leaders obviously would destroy the group of people, they'll wreck autonomies and tear societies apart irreparably. Now, based on numbers, it is estimated that at least 30% and rising of the world's leadership is widely affected by one or more of these sources. It is crucial that the crisis tackled and leadership is reminded to fit the new world order. Now, what I mean, there are these 5 flaws of current leaders. Unable. This is the fact that leaders had the lack of proficiency and skills in delegating the task and making sure their followers are also on the same movement. Unintelligent. This refers to how leaders are thinking irrationally, and their mindset could not their mindset thinking rationally because mostly because of their mindset, and this could cause many of our global leaders to turn a blind eye whenever there's an elephant in the room. Number 3, we have immature, as I said, due to the narrow-minded mindset. Leaders tend to do things on their own matters, and this childish behavior can cause a war in politics and society. Number 4 is immoral. This refers to like leaders who take corruption and power towards their own greed. For example, like what our previous presenters just said about Kim Jong-un in North Korea. This immorality can really wreck what our citizens are facing. And finally, destructive. This means about leaders using the powers to the max until they could destroy their own country. Okay. Now here's some goals for young leaders. Goal number 1: adaptability and agility. Great leaders are said to possess a heightened ability to think outside the box. Instead of continually reinventing the wheel, they learn to do new unexpected things with the tools already at hand, while encouraging others to do the same. Leaders in the 21st century need to be able to continuously innovate and manage disruptions effectively. To do this, they need to remember that everyone has something to offer and cultivate a culture where every employee feels comfortable to suggest ideas and propose solutions. Now, this will go a long way in creating an adaptive and agile organization that is well faced to face the disruption. Next, we need long-term lens. Now, leaders in the 21st century need to focus more on their long-term strategy rather than short-term tactics. And this also have the ability to think and plan ahead. So getting bogged down by details. They will need to have a futuristic vision in order to lead the way towards strategic execution. One way that leaders can do this is to identify internal stakeholders, investors, and shareholders that share similar long-term values and they'll work relentlessly in partnership with them. Number 3 is having a purpose. Now, this is important, but it is critical to have an inspiration one. Leaders need to have a personal purpose, but it should be aligned with that of the organizations. Both companies and its leadership teams should have a clear purpose that goes beyond annual revenue and profitability targets. An unwavering focus, a clear vision, and true belief in a purpose means that leaders need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. Okay, leaders who do not practice what they preach can be abandoned very quickly. The same can apply to leaders who do not lead with clarity and focus. The 21st century requires all of these to be essential traits of leadership. Okay, next we have is resilience. Now, this aspect is going to be a much sought after trait amongst leaders in today's times. Resilient leaders would see failures as temporary setbacks and opportunities to learn from. They also have a strong character and positive attitude during periods of turbulence. When faced with uncertainty, a resilient leader will find ways to constantly move forward and stay ahead of the curve, instead of just staying in the checkpoint or go back. To demonstrate resilience, leaders need to communicate frequently and with intent, to be bold while taking long-term strategic bets, and champion a constantly improving mindset in their organization. And finally, we'll go to the next part, is how the youth can do their part. Now, here I show you a few pictures of our young leaders. The example is at the middle. We have Kristen actually, who produced bottles of Viserpentin. And then here at the top left, we have Nelson Quach from South Sudan, which he mostly tackles with the administration of COVID-19. And there are a lot more young leaders out there in whole parts of the world to do their acts in correcting their nation and globe and the globe. Okay, so I have 5 ways the youth can step up to global issues. Number 1, they could provide essential services and companionship. Now, what this means is that young leaders could create their own services that is essential to what their province is facing now, and perhaps they could collaborate with other companies or services to promote more. Then we have the obvious thing, which is the social media, and social media is a powerful tool, and it could be used to spread information. Just make sure your information is accurate and being verified. Third thing, we need to speak out for effective and equitable care. Now, speaking out may be like this, maybe a little action, but however, speaking out shows a courage and how you concern as the youth in these challenges. Then we need to harness the strength of communications, and finally, we need to give our utmost performance in voluntary and raising various charities. Okay, so conclusion. The uncertainty around the world adding a unique challenge for our modern leaders in the planet. They have to juggle in the face of uncertainty. Leaders have a central role to play when it comes to building a new normal. The role of leadership and leadership effectiveness have been a major issue in the literature of world society. Thus, we as the youth must respond to these changes that are happening in this realm of challenges. And our final quote, what the late Professor Peter Drucker once said: wherever you see a successful business, someone once have made a courageous decision. And that's all, folks. Thank you very much. Also, one thing I would like to clarify, maybe if I could I have the permission to skip the Q&A, because I'm currently having a light migraine, and I don't think I could formulate my answers rationally. Is it fine?
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you, Iman.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So now our forum for this session has come to an end. First and foremost, thank you to our panelists for providing their insightful views on the topic, modern leaders steered of global issues. Thank you also to everyone who attended this forum. We hope that it's been very beneficial to you in some way or another, and we hope to see you at our closing ceremony, the 13th of August at 5 p.m. For all participants, please do stay in the meeting as we'll be having a quick photo session. Stay safe and take care.